We're 1 week away from what you worked so hard for.
It's NAIA football with Dannelly and Donley.
And don't you let a moment go without thinking about what's there for you to reach out and grasp.
Welcome in, everybody. This is NAIA football with Dannelly and Donley. I am the aforementioned Jason Dannelly, and very much appreciate you joining us this week for Selection Sunday in NAIA football. And it was almost like yesterday, nothing happened, right? It was just an easy day of NAIA football. No real crazy things that we had to consider coming. I am absolutely kidding. That's a joke. Oh my God. Let's bring in two-time national championship, offensive coordinator, multiple coordinator of the year awards. His name is Pat Donnelly, formerly of the University of St. Francis in Indiana. Hey, Pat.
Hi, pal. We're talking about it. It's not, anything happened yesterday. Just kind of a normal day, and the teams that won. No shakeups.
Not a whole lot. No. And now we're like everybody that's watching this show. We've also got like another screen up trying to see the selection show. And it does look like the NAIA Championship Series selection show has gone live. I got her up on the old iPad here. So I don't know how I'm going to do this. I probably need to make some notes as this thing goes because I'm not
we're going to get real creative.
We're going to get real creative in doing this. But, Pat, talk a little bit about yesterday. You were out seeing some games, kind of checking out what was happening in the Mid-States Football Association Mid-East, and big upset, Indiana Wesleyan falls to Concordia. So needless to say, there's a lot of people that did not necessarily see it coming in that fashion, but a big upset to say the least.
Well, you're seeing the Mid-States East kind of taking the page from the Frontier, where you're having those upsets. Seems like every week that's happening. So call me Nostradamus, Jason. I kind of talked about that as an upset alert game from last week, and sure enough, it came to fruition. I thought Concordia just came out. I watched the game. I thought they were fantastic. They just threw haymakers the entire day, played strong defense. Indiana Wesleyan's a great running football team, and they've got an 1,100-yard rusher after 9 games, bottled him up all day. I think you got to start there with Coach Schumacher, and the defense there did a tremendous job in the plan versus Indiana Wesleyan. I'll be honest with you, Jay, Indiana Wesleyan was asleep. It was one of those games where they've had a tremendous year, no question about it, but they had kind of that down game. I don't see it affecting them long term. I don't think in the postseason. I think it's one of those one-off games that it just happens in a long season. But it's going to be really interesting to see kind of where they fall now, because Indiana Wesleyan, I mean, they're splitting the conference now with Marion, the east side of the Mid-States Football Association. So I'm not sure how that's going to work with the automatic qualifier, Jason. The splitting of the conference of who gets the home game or the bye week.
I believe the Indiana Wesleyan will retain as the automatic qualifier because they split with Marion. Both had one loss. Indiana Wesleyan beats Marion in the head-to-head. They get the conference championship. The NAIA selection show rolling through right now. They're announcing some of the automatic qualifiers. We can kind of do the same thing here, too, as we get going. We know the teams that won conference championships who are in. Obviously, Northwestern in as the top team in the country. They beat Jamestown yesterday, 40-11. Then you had Grandview blank Clark 40-0. Indiana Wesleyan has that loss. They don't necessarily, come as the number 3 seed or anything like that. But they do retain the automatic qualifier out of the Mid-States Football Association Mid-East. Kaiser gets it out of the Sun Conference. They blow through Florida Memorial. And then the one that looks out of place here, Ottawa at 6-5, is the automatic qualifier out of the KCAC Bissell. Going through a couple of the slides that the NAI is putting up, they've got Marion as an automatic qualifier, as well. And Indiana Wesleyan, I'm kind of doing double watching here as we go. So we haven't seen anything that we didn't already know from, this slide or the next slide that we've got of automatic qualifiers here. Evangel wins in overtime over Bethel. That was a game that if Bethel would have won that, Friends would have got the automatic qualifier. Speaking of Bethel, Tennessee announced as an automatic qualifier here as they go through on the NAIA selection show. St. Xavier is going to be an automatic qualifier. So is Louisiana Christian, Dickinson State, and Reinhardt. All of them were conference champions. Montana Western gets the conference championship out of the Frontier Conference, and Georgetown of the Mid-States. And then the one that's up in the air that I'm kind of anxiously anticipating what they do here is the Heart. There is a three-way tie for the Heart in the South Division. And that was between Benedictine, Baker, and Mid-American Nazarene. And the highest rated team will get that qualifying automatic qualification. And that's why I don't have number 13 filled in here. So we're a couple minutes into the NAIA selection show, about halfway through what they've got posted. It's a 9-minute video. I could just fast forward to the parts where they show who's playing who, but I'll go through the anticipation as everybody else. Morningside getting in as an automatic qualifier here too.
Is that the number one at large?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. So they split all the split conference champions still get the automatic qualifier. Now they're going through the at large.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, and it looks like we got College of Idaho on here. So COI
too. Yeah,
makes it in
after losing another game yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Tip your cap.
That was at
Southern Oregon.
That was one that you kind of saw coming too. I don't know if they're going through the AQs now because you got St. Xavier. They just pulled up. I think they're just going through. That's not alphabetical either. I don't know how they're going through this on their show, Pat. I'm going to be honest. So maybe by the coach's rating. Maybe they're going by the coach's rating here is what they're doing.
Anything on the Heart?
Nothing yet.
What do you think's going to happen there?
I think Baker. My gut tells me Baker.
Are you running a commercial? They're running a commercial.
Mike Singletary. It's cool, dude. Love you for your crazy eyes.
First down playbook.
I could. But then I'm probably going to skip over something that I needed to actually see. Put your commercial at the beginning or just beg people for money to donate, which, by the way, you can donate to the Victory Sports Network. All the links are on our social media. Also, we will take Q&A. So if you have questions for us, you can post them on Facebook. You can post them on Twitter. You can post them on the YouTube comment section. Those will come through to us. We'll be able to answer your questions as we're going here. We got 3 minutes left in the video before, and now see, they got the anticipation here. I mean, good on them. I should get on there and comment, hey, come over to VSN after this is over and watch. But they got 1,800 people watching now. All right, first round. Here we go. We got Reinhardt. We got RU taking on St. Thomas. Okay, St. Thomas was one I thought would make it in as an automatic qualifier. So we got St. Thomas in Reinhardt. Not entirely sure where that game is being played because I don't have the volume on this. We'll find that out. We got Dickinson State in for the 24th time in Montana Tech. That was one I thought I saw coming with Montana Tech getting the win yesterday. They obviously beating Carroll the last week of the season. That proves to be their benefit, and Montana Tech makes it to the NAIA Championship Series. Then we got Ottawa. And Dort. Okay, that makes sense. Ottawa taking on Dort. So I'm going to assume that Dort will be hosting that game. That's my assumption. And what else do we got? We got Louisiana Christian. You got LCU. They're going to take on Baker. You just asked me what my gut was, and I said Baker.
You nailed it.
Did I nail all of them? I might have this morning. I can't remember what I wrote in the article. Montana Tech was my question mark. Mm-hmm. Who they were going to potentially leave out and who was potentially going to be in. So you've got Baker and Louisiana Christian in the first round. Let's see what else they say here. We got like 30 seconds left. So yeah, they just got all the qualifiers there. That's it. Doesn't really tell us too much as to who's going where and what's playing who and all that sort of fun stuff. So I believe we've got all of the information that we need, Pat. I think we actually know who's in and who's playing now. How about that? Live television, sort of, on the internet.
Looking at the whole field here, Jason, you see the last thing they have there. You can kind of pause and see the entire field. Again, we have the first round matchups. There's some good matchups there, Jay. I think the Reinhardt St. Thomas one just jumps out.
Absolutely.
As just talk about skill and speed. That's going to be really intriguing. I think Baker's a pretty decent team, Jason. I think it's been a great league in the Heart South this year. I expect them to come out and play well. As Louisiana Christian, what is their mindset going to be? Being in the playoffs as a team that's transitioned now to NAIA. I don't know. What do you think about that one? We're going to go down the list here. LCU and Baker.
So let's see here. Feel like I need to do a quick little reset. Let's do this real quick. Let's do this. Let's get that off there because we know who the qualifiers are. Just you and me, mano a mano. First of all, thank you everybody for coming into the Victory Sports Network live show, NAIA Football with Pat Donnelly. I'm Jason Dannelly. Those of you coming over to this broadcast now after maybe watching what the NAIA announced. So the full list of qualifiers, let's do that real quick. So here's who's in the postseason. Baker, Kansas, Bethel of Tennessee, College of Idaho, Dickinson State, Dordt, Evangel, Georgetown, Grandview, Indiana Wesleyan, Kaiser out of Florida, Louisiana Christian, Marion, Montana Tech, Montana Western, Morningside, Northwestern, Ottawa, Reinhardt, St. Xavier, St. Thomas. So those are your qualifiers. Our first round games that they announced, and obviously these will be the teams that whoever wins will go on and play the 12 teams that have buys. So Louisiana Christian, Baker, Ottawa versus Dordt, Dickinson versus Montana Tech, and Reinhardt versus St. Thomas. So back to your question, I love that LCU Baker matchup. I think that's a good gauge for where's the Sooner at in terms of their growth as an NAIA conference versus one of the traditional power conferences in the NAIA. The Heart is never the best conference in the NAIA, but they're never the worst conference in the NAIA. They've had some national champion teams come out of that conference, and Baker is a team that they're obviously not as good as a Grandview, which came out of the other side. They lost to Benedictine, who did not make the NAIA postseason, and they beat Mid-American Nazarene, right? I believe they beat Mid-American Nazarene. Regardless of all that, they're in the postseason. So you've got a squad that is upper in the NAIA taking on a relative newcomer in LCU. And I like that matchup a lot. It'll tell us a lot about, I think, where the Sooner is. You've got the best in the Sooner versus the best in that side of the Heart. Some may argue the second best, in that side of the Heart, just because of how everything shook out there in the end. So I like that matchup. I like seeing teams that don't ever play one another getting a chance to play one another. What are your thoughts, Pat?
It's the old and the new. We talk about the Blue Bloods. Baker's a Blue Blood. Been around a long, long time, have played in playoffs, played in the national championship, have been there year in and year out. Even with coaching changes that have happened the last handful of years, they seem to get back going fairly quick with new leadership, and they've done it again. And you look at Louisiana Christian, like we talked about, it's the new playing the old. So I think it's an interesting matchup, like you said, of seeing where the Sooner is. It's kind of that conference that has a crazy travel and distance and all that. So I'm assuming that game is in Louisiana, I would assume, right, Jason?
That would be my assumption. I obviously had the volume off. So if somebody in the, comments wants to tell us for sure where that game is being played, my assumption would be that LCU would host that. Now, it's a little bit different in the NAIA postseason. As you know, the bid process, that is still part of it to get a home site. So there might be this scenario where maybe a higher rated team is actually going to travel because they chose not to bid this round. So there is that whole aspect of it as well. The other game in the first round, maybe to talk about a little bit. So you've got the GPAC taking on the KCAC. Dort is going to Ottawa. Ottawa at 6-5. It's tough not to say that they're the bottom team making it into the NAIA postseason, but they're in, and they'll have an opportunity to potentially upset Dort. I like that matchup as well, because here you have Dort who ends up being, the third team to make it out of the GPAC. They lost to Midland early in the year, but they kind of saved themselves late by knocking off Morningside. So just where's that team going, and what can they do? We'll get an opportunity to find that against Ottawa.
Yeah, Dort knows how to win. I mean, you go and knock off Morningside. I don't care what the situation is. And we talked about it last week that Morningside lost their first league game in how many 70 some odd games, and then Dort came in and beat them again. So Dort knows how to win. I think that's an interesting matchup, because I would expect Dort to really come out and flex the muscle and really show their will in that game. Ottawa's going to be, is it like, hey, we got in? How great is that? What's their mindset going to be? That matchup, I think, is somewhat intriguing in that regard. But I think Dort's a pretty decent team. You've seen, the matchups, the scores, the stats that they're producing. I think they're a good football team. Be interesting to see what happens in that. Ottawa's been there before too, though. I mean, this is not the first time for them. And has Dort been the postseason, Jay? And I mean, is there? I don't know what the stats are. If you know the top of your head, you're a GPAC guy. It's been a while.
I believe they were in one and done and got bounced a couple years ago.
Okay.
I'd have to rack my brain a little bit on that one, but I am being told the NAI top 25 is actually up on their website. Thank you, Rob, behind the scenes producer. Rob, the former owner of the Victory Sports Network, before the former owner of the Victory Sports Network bought the Victory Sports Network. He's helping out in the comments. All right. Championship series announced. Just kind of looking here real quick. I do have some statistics on here. So Dort at large, this is their second appearance. They went one and done. So I was right a couple years ago. So you're just kind of, all right, final top 25 poll. So this will give us a little bit of a rundown. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you have questions, add them to the comments. Jesse Klein, I appreciate you, Jesse. I appreciate you coming and watching the program. The former Ride Rangers ride from the message boards on the on the comment section. So the top 25, Kaiser moves up to third. So 1 stays Northwestern, 2 is Grandview. Kaiser goes to third. Georgetown 4th, Marion 5th. Indiana Wesleyan falls to 6th from 3rd. Bethel moves up to number 7. Montana Western to number 8. Evangel 9. College of Idaho ties at 10th 3 ways with Morningside and St. Xavier. So Morningside, St. Xavier, and College of Idaho all came in at 10th. So 13 was Ottawa of Arizona, and 14 was Dort. So that is where the selection committee came in and looked at what was going on in the full season of both of these programs, and ultimately decided that Dort was a better representative to go into the postseason than Ottawa, Arizona, because by the old method, what would have happened, Pat, is wherever the coach's rating was, right, that team would have made it. But the championship committee chose Dort over Ottawa of Arizona, and also chose St. Thomas over Ottawa of Arizona. So kind of going back to the top 25. So Ottawa was 13, Dort was 14, St. Thomas was 15, Dickinson 16, Montana Tech 17, Reinhardt 18, Lindsey Wilson 19, Baker 20, 21 was Louisiana Christian, Mid-American Nazarene moves to 22, Friends to 23, Carroll 24, Benedictine 25. So Dort and St. Thomas actually made it in, as well as Montana Tech over Ottawa of Arizona. Now, there's a lot of things that go into these matchups, and I don't want to speak out of turn in how they determine those last 8 spots, but travel is one of the considerations that they have. And so I don't know, Pat, if Ottawa, despite the fact they were rated 13th, that where they're located at, they would have had to fly that team to play somebody somewhere, whereas Montana Tech will bus to Dort. Everything else is a bus trip. So I think that's a consideration as well. So Ottawa to 8-1 really is the first team that is out of the postseason at number 13. So I did get a question here how second round matchups will work. What we have is basically 1 through 12 is semi-decided. The winners out of this will then basically be seeded into a 16-team postseason. So we'll be back next Sunday to discuss it all over again with who's playing who and who's going where. So any instant thoughts there as you look at the top 25, Pat? Are you looking at that with me too?
Yeah, I am. No, I mean, it's kind of what we expected. I don't think there's really any surprises other than, obviously those bottom 3 teams of who's in, who's out. But no, I mean, I think it seems to me just at a glance or looking through them, they have the right teams. I would say so. Again, I don't know the Ottawa, Arizona situation is obviously a little unique. But I think the other ones, when they hit the nail on the head, it seems like, at least, and you get this new format, does provide some opportunities to a team like, Otto, Kansas, for instance, who, I'm not sure, even though as a conference champion, they wouldn't have been in the top 25 by the old system. They would have been left out. They
would have been left out.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. And Montana Tech wouldn't be here either, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Yep. Montana Tech would have been left out. So by the old system, you basically would have had, 13 teams in, and then you would have added probably Ottawa, Dort, St. Thomas, and maybe 1 or 2 more, depending on, I'm trying to look at conference champions. Louisiana Christian, by the old method, Louisiana Christian would have been left out of the postseason because they would not have been up in the top 20. Baker would have got in by the skin of their teeth, being the Hart Conference champion or the Hart North champion there. Lindsey Wilson at 7-3 falls to 19. That was one that almost a victim of scheduling. You lose games at the end of the season, you fall quicker and you don't have a chance to climb back. That's kind of a tough one for him there. We're a little all over the place with the show, but for people just joining us, the games next week are going to be Reinhardt and St. Thomas. We haven't really talked about that one yet. Dickinson and Montana Tech, Ottawa and Dort, and then Louisiana Christian and Baker. So those are our first round matchups. And then after those games are done next week, they'll take the winners and then they'll put them into the top 16, and we will figure out the rest of them from there. I did send a text to a coach to see if they want to join us to talk, but I haven't heard anything back. It's almost like he's got something better to do right now. Like he's talking to his team about who they're going to play next week and what practice will be like. I mean, how dare he? How dare he?
This is the scramble mode right now. I'll tell you from experience. When you get your pairing, finally, now you're doing the communication with film, trying to get that stuff and get a jump start on the game plan as much as possible. You usually get word of who you're playing, so that immediately the coaching staff scrambles and gets on YouTube, looks at all the live stream stuff, at least to get some preliminary thoughts of your opponent. But then you actually get the actual all 22 film within a few minutes after the announcement. But again, go back to the old days, Jay. We talked about that before the whole exchange VHS or DVDs back in the day. That was always a blast. To figure out the time zone and where the meeting point was, the halfway point. I have a lot of stories on that one. Again, it's probably off-season show. But this is the scramble mode for these coaches. These 8 programs and coaching staffs are jumping into it and trying to get a game plan going because those that have been around it and they've coached before, you really work ahead. In the regular season, by Thursday and Friday, you're starting to look at next week's opponents. The game plan of the current game that weekend is put to bed, and you really start on the next week's game. So you have some preliminary thoughts, even right after your Saturday game, your next week's opponent. You've got some thought of what you'd like to work on and what you'd like to do from a game plan standpoint. This is totally new. So you find out, you got to scramble and put something together because these next 24 hours are pretty crazy for these coaching staffs to get game plans going, because then you have the travel element too. The teams that travel, I will tell you, Jason, you know this as well as anyone, the traveling in the NAIA, because of the stress that's put on the coaching staff to do some of those details, that quick turnaround travel, it does present some challenges. And I do think the home teams have a definite advantage of the playoffs. I think significantly, to be honest with you. So again, I think these home teams do have a bit of an edge in that regard to not having to worry about, again, bus schedules and contacting, restaurants and the food and the hotels and all those. That's a nightmare. I've done it. It's terrible. The home teams are sitting back and say, we're hosting, we got a couple of details we got to iron out on our end, but for the most part, it's more internal with the university. Coaching staff's involved with the travel, if you're on the road, the playoffs. So there's some challenges.
There certainly are. My challenge right now, and I don't like to I don't want to put false information out there, and we didn't listen to the show. We're kind of just looking at everything online, and we know the matchups, but I don't see a distinct who is hosting. And so I've sent a couple text messages here as you're talking to try to find out who's going where, and it would be my gut that St. Thomas, Montana Tech, Dort, and Baker are hosting, or is it the other way?
I don't know. I thought maybe it's the other way.
You're the coach. Come on. I'm just a guy with a computer.
Well, it seemed like the way they're presenting on the show was like that first team was hosting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I assume.
Because if that's the case,
wouldn't Reinhardt be hosting?
Reinhardt, Dickinson, Ottawa, and Louisiana Christian hosting then.
Yeah. I don't know.
So possibly
help us out here.
Yeah. If somebody, sending text messages to random people here, because I want to confirm that before I say, yes, this is absolutely what's happening. A little bit of a rant from the comments from Nathaniel. I'm a homer, but it seems like the committee worked pretty hard to avoid giving Dickinson State a home playoff game. No travel excuse works here. I get it. The North Star is far worse than the Frontier, but DSU dominated the North Star, played Rocky better than Tech did. So that would lead you to believe that Dickinson is going to Tech.
Okay.
But again,
or is still, Montana obviously is vast. I don't
Butte,
know.
Montana. So you're just going to go. Honestly, for Dickinson, it's get on I-90 and just drive for, is that 8 hours?
Yeah.
Or vice versa. I'm trying to do the math here because I can get to Billings in 8, and then from Billings to Bozeman is a couple more hours, and Butte is beyond that. So I've made that drive way too many times.
Beautiful.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you No. Have you been to Eastern Montana? No, Eastern Montana to Billings is. Sorry.
Yeah. I've only been to Helena, so
beautiful there. Butte as well. Beautiful, great place to be. So
I'm trying to find some Twitter posts here, Jason, so we can get some.
You do some looking on. You do some looking on that. So. Kind of hitting some of the facts here. So Baker making their 20th appearance in the NAIA Championship Series. Dickinson State, with their 24th appearance, is now tied for second all-time in NAIA Championship Series appearances. Northwestern is number 1. They are now tied for second with Carroll College, who has 24. And then, of course, Dickinson then at 24, and Georgetown right behind them. Georgetown making their 23rd appearance in the NAIA Championship Series this year. And then you've got St. Xavier in for the 16th time. Morningside in for the 20th time. They have made it into every NAIA postseason since 2003. So that 20 is from when they made their first NAIA postseason appearance after coming back from Division II, and they've made it every year since. So incredible run from Morningside, a team that could make some real hay in the postseason. Let's just kind of run through it here and we'll give a little thought on the NAIA Championship Series as to who will make the argument for why this team will win and why they won't win. Starting with who's playing next week. And so let's talk Reinhardt and St. Thomas. I think Reinhardt wins that game. I feel like they've been more consistent. I feel like they're a team that is a little more weathered for the postseason. This is not a new thing for their program. They've been there. That's why I think they win. St. Thomas wins because I think they're the more athletic team. I think they're the team that maybe has a few more weapons, and they've already gone on the road and had a big win over Texas Wesleyan, which I think effectively is what may have held Texas Wesleyan from even being considered after losing yesterday to LCU. So in my mind, that's how each of those teams would win. I'm probably going to pick St. Thomas in that game. I don't know if you have any general thoughts on that one, Pat.
I just have more familiar with Reinhardt. We played him a handful of times. Have a lot of respect for them. Kind of, unique system offensively, and they have, arguably one of the best recruiting bases that they draw from. I don't know a lot about St. Thomas from a firsthand standpoint, but I know what Reinhardt has annually. In the 2 games they've lost, Jason, were to Division II schools. So, or I believe so. Yeah, I think were those Division II schools. I think am I getting that and Kaiser confused? I think I might be.
Getting that and Kaiser confused.
Yeah, Kaiser lost to 2 Division II schools. And I'm drawing a blank who Reinhardt lost to this season, but I know they beat a Georgetown team this year, a very good Georgetown team at home. So I think there's some history there, and I think that there's something to be said for that too. Teams that have been there and done it, it's not a big deal for those teams and those coaching staffs that have gone through the process, especially if you're traveling. I'm serious; it's a big deal to kind of create the expectations, set the stage for your players, know what the expectations are. Those that can manage those details and limit the distractions, make it as smooth as possible so you can focus on the actual game and execute your game plan, I think has a huge, it's a lot to do with it, a lot to do with the success part of it. So I'll take Reinhardt from a familiarity standpoint, but 2 great football teams as there won't be as athletic of 2 teams going at it next Saturday in the NAIA than that game. I would be.
Hold on a second. Getting a live phone call. Hey, we are on the air right now. I'm removing an AirPod so I can talk to you. Who's hosting?
Well, Dort has Ottawa. I know that for sure.
Yep.
St. Thomas is hosting Kaiser.
So,
Right.
So they are hosting. So Dort is hosting.
Yes, they are.
So Dort is hosting. St. Thomas is hosting. Okay, we're just trying to.
Yeah, and then who was the other one in that round?
Montana Tech and Baker.
Remember who's hosting that one?
Okay. Just going by how they have it laid out, because the first round the top.
On YouTube, the top team is the host.
Say that again.
On the YouTube feed for those opening round, the top team listed was the host.
Okay, so top team listed on the YouTube feed is the host. Got it.
That's how I interpreted it. So,
that's
recording?
Yeah, we're on live right now. Don't worry, you're not on the air. Nobody knows who you are. You're just on my phone as I talk into the microphone, and Pat looks at me like, "What are you doing right now?" No, I've got them on my thing in front of me here, so we're set. I'll give you a call after the show. Okay, bye.
Our mystery source.
Mystery source, but I think the mystery source is as equally confused as we both are. So
by what our mystery source is saying, St. Thomas is hosting Reinhardt. From what he's saying,
that is what my understanding.
I'm going back to the YouTube video now. If the top team is the home team, in fact, it's St. Thomas hosting. Montana Tech would be the host team over Dickinson State. Dort would be hosting Ottawa, Kansas.
Yes. Now I'm trying to get my AirPods to reconnect because it connected to my phone. Because why not just make this?
And Baker would be hosting Louisiana Christian, according to, if our source is correct, with the top team being the host team. Unless they were still working out details, Jason, I would not put it past the NAIA to announce the matchup and still trying to figure out bids. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure if that's a thing or not.
I would agree, Pat. I'm also trying to get my headphones to reconnect here because they decided to connect to my cell phone, and now I've got to shut things off, and technical difficulties. Why would that not be a problem the first time in? But with that said, so let's talk a little bit while I do this. Let's talk a little bit about, as I pull it up here, Is there one of the matchups that intrigues you more? Reinhardt, St. Thomas, Dickinson, Montana Tech, Ottawa, Dort, LCU, Baker. Is one of those matchups more intriguing to you?
I think Reinhardt, St. Thomas, because of the speed factor and skill. I think knowing the recruiting bases, knowing the type of speed that's involved, I think that's going to be an entertaining game. Again, just looking at a glance, I think they're all going to be competitive. I mean, the one that I think that has the chance of maybe not being is the Ottawa Dort game, just because of the situation for a team that's just around 500 getting that automatic bid, and Dort's had a really successful year. But I think for sure 3 of the 4 I think are good games, tight games. I think all are worthy of being in the postseason and getting this opportunity with the new format. It's going to be interesting to see. I think the Baker Louisiana Christian game is, because I don't know. I've not seen a lot of the Sooner Conference. Wouldn't really, none of us have for the most part. I mean, they're obviously new to the game, and I think that's going to be intriguing to see. Like we mentioned before, old versus new. You got like I mentioned before, the speed with the Florida team and a Georgia team going head to head. Blue Bloods of Montana Tech and Dickinson State. I think that's a great physical game. Those are 2 physical teams. In a tough part of the world, I think is intriguing. So I think they all have some merit of being interesting, matchups and something to be excited about watching this upcoming Saturday.
Yeah, I love it when we see some of the traditional powers in NAIA football have to go up against somebody new, and we see that. Maybe the Montana Tech Dickinson game is the least attractive because of the proximity there, the fact that those teams have played a little bit in the last couple of seasons. Dickinson spent some time, in the Frontier Conference a few years back, so they've played one another. There's less attractiveness with that matchup, but I think that's a great matchup because Montana Tech has been a team that's been up and down this year. I mean, we've seen them beat Central Washington, who has qualified for the NCAA Division II postseason. We've seen them, beat College of Idaho, which was the College of Idaho lone loss coming into this week. But then we've seen them lose to Rocky. We saw them lose to Carroll early in the year. We saw them lose to Montana Western. So this is a team which one are you going to get? Are you going to get the team that was healthier at the beginning of the season that beat Central Washington? Or are you going to get the banged up team through the middle of the year, or the one that came out yesterday, found a way to win on the road against Carroll College and, essentially pull that one out to victory in the end?
They're going to be tested. They've played quality opponents all year and have defeated some, and there have been some tight ball games that they lost. So, I think they're certainly prepared for postseason football. Much like the others, I think Reinhardt certainly has with the schedule that they play. I think it's a great time of the year, and the beauty of this system is you're going to get head-to-head matchups. It's not going to be by a selection committee. You're getting these extra teams that are in where before they would have been phased out. Just how it would have shaken out before, and now they get an opportunity to prove themselves. I have a question for you. Can these teams make a deep run, into like the quarterfinals? Do you see anything there a team there that could possibly do that? Win a round, win 2.
I think St. Thomas is the team that athletically could do it, but they've got a tough draw with Reinhardt in that first round. I think that is. I think they could potentially be the team that does make a run. Reinhardt maybe being the other. Dickinson and Montana Tech, that'll be interesting because whoever wins that game is probably playing College of Idaho,
right?
And Montana Tech has got a little bit of a history there. They could potentially see themselves, with a rematch of sense, or a rematch of sorts, I guess you could say, with that game. So that'll be an interesting one. And I think I have finally got my AirPods reconnected through all of that. Oh my God, Pat.
That's why I go to school, buddy. I have the whole cute Beats, the ones that are remote, and I can never get them to connect properly. So I go old school. People are laughing.
Yeah, people are just like, what are these guys doing?
This old guy with these old school pods. I mean, come on, is he serious?
But it sounds good. That's the important part.
That's the key thing, right?
That is the key thing. So, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, because we can do that next week, start projecting the matchups down the road. But, again, going back to your question, St. Thomas, I think, could make a run. Maybe Reinhardt. That all is dependent on obviously who wins that game, and then what's the next round draw. You could see a rematch with Georgetown. You could see a rematch with Kaiser. You could see a lot of things, but they want to try to avoid those rematches early, so you could see them doing a little bit of travel. I think to be honest, I think if you can avoid Northwestern, if you can avoid Indiana Wesleyan, if you can avoid Marion, and if you can avoid Grandview in your first round game, I think you've got a chance to kind of sneak your way through the postseason. I would not want to play any one of those 4 teams in the opening round, in the opening game, whenever you're going to play them, even with Indiana Wesleyan's loss to Concordia. Like you mentioned, Concordia threw a lot at them. They knew they had nothing to lose. Indiana Wesleyan, maybe with some guys banged up health-wise down the road, but needless to say, you got to be ready for the postseason. It very much could give you an opportunity to get into the postseason if you can avoid those 4. And that's not to take anything away from the rest of the qualifiers. I just feel like there's those 4, and then kind of the next 8, and then you have this next group of 8.
It's always kind of that way, isn't it? To some level. I mean, it's pretty rare that it's not that. But again, with this expanded playoff, do you wonder? It means you're playing an extra game for one. Can someone make a run? Can make a deep run? That's maybe a team that by the old standards or the old way of doing things would have been phased out. Now they get the opportunity and they can make some noise. So I agree with you. I think the Southern teams are intriguing to me because they have the speed element that can change football games at a every single play. Somebody can make something really extraordinary happen. They have those type of athletes with St. Thomas and Reinhardt. I've seen Reinhardt many, many times, and boy, oh boy, do they ever. So from semifinals to national championship games to playoff games, we've seen them a few times in my day. So, they're one that just kind of jumps off the page to me.
So taking a look at, what has happened here in the postseason and the teams that are left out, I do want to take a moment and address the first teams left out. You feel terrible for Ottawa, Arizona, 13th rated team. They don't make the NAIA postseason in the expanded round of 20. There'll be a lot of people talking about that. The issue purely comes back to, I think, travel being one, and 2, being in a conference that is not well established in terms of NAIA football. The rest of the nation doesn't know. Like, hey, Texas Wesleyan and Louisiana Christian and Ottawa might be head and shoulders above the rest of the NAIA. I watched some of their games play this year. They're quality teams. They have good opponents. They go up against one another and compete very well. I just don't know how that translates to a Baker, to a Hart Conference. And so they can take a huge step forward in the first round. The Sooner can, if LCU can put up a great game or get a W over Baker, to make people start thinking, okay, we got to consider the Sooner a little bit more, because that's what happened to the Sun Conference a couple years ago when they burst onto the scene. A lot of people looked at, well, yeah, it's Florida football, but that conference really hasn't done anything in the NAIA. And then Kaiser, as like a 13 seed last year, ends up in the national championship game. I think it got a lot of people thinking, and it gave the Sun Conference just that little boost that they needed. And LCU could do that this year for the Sooner if they are able to get that win.
Just going back in my research too, Jason, Reinhardt lost at Southeastern and Cumberland's in back-to-back weeks early in the season in September. So those are their 2 losses, and really beat a Georgetown team that next week they dropped 2 in a row, beat Georgetown, then rattled off the next 6. So hot team right now.
And I'm feeling a little bit better about the who's going where. So on the NAIA scoreboard website, Ottawa going to Dort. That's in print now. Dickinson going to Montana Tech. So knowing that, then you've got Baker, who is going to be hosting Louisiana Christian, and St. Thomas, who's going to be hosting Reinhardt there. So based on what we're seeing, that's what's happening. And the reason I'm harping on that, and Pat and I have talked about that from big new coming into the show here, home field is so huge in the postseason. There's been several years where I looked at the NAI postseason matchups back when there was just, 16 teams in the postseason. I'd look at the 8 and I go, okay, who's hosting? Okay, chalk. And then, okay, you got a couple teams in the middle here. Let's go with this team because I know they're better. Or if I don't know if they're absolutely better, go with the home team. And many times picking that first round, be 7-1 and 6-2 just by picking the home team chalk. The home field advantage in the NAI postseason is critical. And that's not to say teams haven't gone on the road and won big games, but I think every coach in their right mind would much rather say, no, I would rather be at home and not have to deal with all the other distractions that are going to happen this week.
It's insane. And when you're doing in the regular season, there's preparation. You have T's crossed and I's dotted of the details of your trip. You're putting this together as they're putting together as we speak right now. I mean, they're going to have the host hotel, to kind of give people some background of how usually that works. When you're hosting a playoff game in the NEI, you're going to have a host hotel. So that's already set up. So you're kind of told where to be and where to go. But you're still trying to figure out the other details of your trip. Obviously, your bus service, or if you're taking a flight, whatever it may be, you got to figure things out fairly quick because you want to focus on the game. And so many times you're going to have your head coach, you're going to have your athletic director, and an assistant or two, or maybe even three, assigned to some piece of this trip and organizing it. It is not easy. And you're trying to focus on, as an offensive coordinator, I'm worried about third down and red zone, and I'm still trying to figure out what our bus assignment is, what time's the bus getting here. We're stopping at Subway in the middle of Iowa somewhere on the way out. I mean, there's details there that are, it's just a distraction. It's something other than the actual game that you have to focus on and make sure you're doing it correctly because you don't want it to be a distraction. You want it to be as seamless as possible so you can't have your players, be in somewhat of a general routine as you're accustomed to traveling during the regular season. But sometimes it's just impossible. You can't do it. I remember going to Lindsey Wilson a few years ago, I think 2019, and you're assigned to a hotel. And, we talked about, Lindsey Wilson in Columbia, Kentucky is in a remote part of Kentucky. There's not a whole lot around there. You stay about 45 minutes away.
Yep.
So just to travel from your hotel and then your restaurants are going to the actual stadium. We had a walkthrough on Friday. You have to go play the game on Saturday. You stretch your day an additional hour for travel to the game site. I mean, that's not customary typically when you have a playoff game. So that was something new. And I think everything that was involved with food, it had to be fried. I don't think in that area of Kentucky, nothing was grilled or baked or broiled.
Get some grilled chicken breasts and green beans. Sure thing.
They looked at it's catfish, hush puppies, okra. I mean, everything was fried. It's like, can we get something that's not fried? This is great. I'm not saying it's bad, but we got some guys that will be moving around tomorrow, and the deep fried stuff is pretty brutal. But
so we are taking your questions, kind of going back to that. So we've kind of calmed the storm a little bit here after the initial announcement of the NAI postseason, who's in the postseason, who made it, who didn't, and we'll take your questions. So if you have any questions about the general matchups or the NAI postseason, go ahead and comment them. If you're on YouTube, we can see those comments. If you're on Facebook, we can see those comments. If you're watching on Twitter, go ahead and give me the @. I'll try to keep an eye on the old Twitter feed here to get your questions answered. And we'll spend a little bit of time here answering any questions that anybody kind of comes up with here and essentially let you know what our thoughts are on the NAI Championship Series in the postseason. I like the change. It's a little different, Pat, to be talking about 20 teams and who's in and knowing a committee was able to make the final say on who made the NAI Championships postseason. I would love to get somebody from the committee on, whether it be this show right now or next week, just to kind of go through, here's the process that we went through. Here's why we decided this team over that team, just to give some credence, I guess you could say, to the teams in the NAI top 25 that were essentially looked over because the committee thought other teams had a little bit better resume than what an Ottawa, Arizona did. But you always feel bad for a team like Ottawa, Arizona with one loss. Their only loss to Texas Wesleyan, that was in week 2 of the season. They did nothing but beat everybody else on the schedule. And one of the teams they beat made the NAI postseason. Also not making it into the postseason, kind of out of that top group. Lindsey Wilson is one that we were talking about last week at 7-3. But I think if anything, if you're not a conference champion, and you got 3 losses, it's going to be really hard for you to make it into the postseason. Lindsey Wilson was one. I know there were some Concordia fans chirping me on Twitter about they thought they should be in the postseason. It's really tough when you have 3 losses, unless those 3 losses are to like Northwestern, Indiana Wesleyan and Marion. It's really tough to say, oh yeah, you should be in the postseason, because I know there is a mentality that no, that you've got a great team, but guess what? There's already 3 teams in the postseason that beat you. So what are you going to do? Go to the postseason and get beat by another team in the postseason?
Right. Can't lose to St. Francis 2 weeks ago if you're Concordia. That's what happened. You win that game, you're in the playoffs. I mean, that's and they were banged up. I mean, there's a lot of issues there with some health and things like that. But I do give them a lot of credit. I mean, they really came out yesterday and played a playoff level game against Indiana Wesleyan. So give them a lot of credit. I did get a chance to watch that game. So, you can't drop the games that you did. They lost to Siena Heights, they lost to Siena Heights. They lost to St. Francis. Those are games that on paper they should win. So it's the way it goes. The Mid-States East, the Frontier, I think the parity in both are just tremendous. I think there's a lot of playoff level teams from a quality standpoint. But again, they're playing each other every single week. I mean, how many weeks in a row, Jason, did the Frontier have a game where a team that was ranked loses to an unranked, or a lower ranked team beats a higher ranked team? I mean, it seemed to be every week since we've been doing the show. It's happened
every week. I was going to say
every
week that we've done this show, we definitely saw that. We saw an unrated team, whether it be Southern Oregon or Montana Tech, who when they were unrated beat a rated team. So it's very tough. Montana Tech ends up being the 3rd team out of the Frontier Conference that makes it in. This kind of goes into one of the questions that was asked from Tom. Hi, Tom. Thanks for checking in. Old friend, who I think his team in the postseason is going to be Louisiana Christian, because he spent time in Louisiana, so that he's a Nebraska guy now, but that's who he's going to go for. But his question was, which conference has most teams in, and which conference has the least? It's a tougher question to answer because of the divisions. I would look at it as like the heart is the heart. Yeah, Grandview made it from this side, Baker made it from this side, but they got 2 in. The KCAC got 2 in. They got their 2 champions in. That was it. The Frontier getting 3 teams in, that's a very good run for their conference, because that's just one division. You got your champion in, you got an at-large, and you got another at-large that really made it on resume there. In the Mid-South, you had 2 teams make it in there. North Star only got 1 in. Mid-States Football Association, Mid-East gets 2. Midwest gets 1. Technically, you could say the entire Mid-States Football Association got 3 teams in. GPAC got 3 teams in. So I'd say for single conferences, as I just kind of go through it in my head, you'd probably look at Frontier GPAC, because they got 3 in. And then Mid-States, they got 3 in. Appalachian only got 1 in. Sun Conference got 2 in, and Sooner only got 1 in. So, and NSAA only got 1 in as well. So only the champions in those rounds. The other question, Evangel, maybe not seeded correctly, can't host as an undefeated. I don't know if they've been seeded. I guess they actually did seed them here. Never mind. Top 12 qualifiers. And they've got Evangel in at number 9. So unless they reseed next weekend, and Evangel as a 9, that means Evangel's going to have to go to one of the top 8 schools, more than likely, to play next week. And again, this is speculation. I don't think they will reseed. I believe, if I remember correctly from the NAIA Championship Series manual, that these are the 12, and your top 8 or top 6 or something like that ends up being the host in the first round. So I got to read through.
You're finding that is that on the NAIA website? The actual seedings? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going back to the YouTube video. I didn't see it.
Yeah, they've got the top 12 qualifiers. So if you go to the NAIA website, to the football page, they've kind of got a championship series qualifiers breakdown on there that you can look at. For anybody that's tuning into this broadcast, you can go there too. So that one goes Northwestern, Grandview, Georgetown, Marion 5, Indiana Wesleyan 6, Bethel 7, Montana Western 8, followed by Evangel, Morningside College of Idaho, and St. Xavier. So by that, if that holds true, then you would have Evangel, Morningside College of Idaho, and St. Xavier traveling. So, and the comment was Evangel maybe not seated correctly. They can't host and they're undefeated. Well, unfortunately for Evangel, going double overtime this last week to Bethel, I think hurt them from moving up. If they would have been the runaway winner on that side of the conference with nobody else in consideration, maybe, but like they were literally an overtime away from maybe being an at-large and Friends making it into the NAI postseason because Friends would have had that tiebreaker. I liked, I look at really the top five, if they're all hosting, top six, if they're all hosting, I kind of see those teams winning. Depending on what happens with the draw for Bethel and Montana Western, that could be very interesting. If you send a team like St. Thomas, maybe has to go to Bethel if they win, or Reinhardt, if they win, has to go to Bethel. That's going to be a really good first round matchup. Yeah. Got another question that came in here, Pat. If you could change anything about the current playoff system, what would it be? Also, should NAI consider having conference championships? I'm assuming conference championship games. If I could change anything about the NAI playoff system, it would be that, and I'll let you answer this too, Pat, but to me, it would be when this comes out here today, we have it all bracketed and seeded, and it just flies and just goes how it is. Now, that's if I could change it. I would need millions of dollars to donate to the NAI to pay for all the travel that could potentially happen. But that would be my change. If the NAI could ever get to that, and people don't understand, it costs a lot of money. The NAI is not this billion-dollar organization where they can just say, yep, fly Reinhardt up to Montana Tech, and that's what we'll do. It just doesn't happen at this level. That's the change I would make, Pat.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, you want to get it exactly right from the matchup standpoint with travel. And like you said, you have to completely eliminate the cost factor and the quick turnaround and all those things too. I know the other levels of the NCAA that have a playoff system are similar, and that they have some struggles with that same thing too. I mean, it's expensive to fly people cross country, in early rounds. So I would agree with you. And then I think the conference championship thing is kind of an interesting question, because I think it's kind of opposite of what we've done here with the playoff system. I think you would eliminate now some rounds in the playoff. You would shrink the playoff system if you had true conference champions, because essentially what you would do, for instance, I'm familiar with the Mid-States. You'd have the Mid-States, the East, and the Mid-States West champion play one another, and then that's your automatic qualifier. And then you're looking at at-large bids and things like that. I would assume it's what you would do. Would you go to a round of 8, a playoff of 8? I'm not sure if you're doing conference championships. And if the teams that don't have 2 divisions, how would you determine that? Is it the 1 versus the 2 and whoever wins? But then, the regular season's irrelevant. Not relevant, but it doesn't have the same weight in those same, like the Frontier, for instance. If you have one play 2, they've already played once. So, I don't know how that works.
I don't think conference. I'll expand on that subject in a bit. I want to give credit to Dr. Scott Crawford, commissioner of the Frontier Conference. He did add a comment here on the selection show. The narrator indicated the top 8 would host next week, no reseeding. So top 8 will host next week. That's what happens when you got to listen to it with the volume down. I don't know if there would have been a copyright issue if we would have, played their video on ours, but I don't want to get into that. The NAI needs to have their announcement show, and then we can speculate like a bunch of morons with a camera and a computer. That's what we do so beautifully. But thank you, Dr. Crawford, for bringing that one in and answering that question. So we know those top 8 will host next week. So Evangel's going to have to go somewhere.
On the road.
And that means they're going to have to go on the road to one of those top 8. So you already start going, ooh, boy, what's going to happen?
Grandview, Georgetown. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. It's going to be tough. Evangel leaves the Heart, joins the KCAC. Here's your prize possession for making it to the postseason. Here's Grandview. Have fun.
Giving up 5 points a game this year.
It's just disgusting defense from Grandview this year.
Awesome.
Got a question late to join here. So skip if you've already discussed. Does ranking or location play a bigger role in scheduling rounds 1 and 2? Also, would you expect Dordt to play Grandview in a round 2 matchup with a win? So first question, does ranking or location play a bigger role? I would say location in this first round plays a bigger role because they don't want to fly teams all over the country. And then after this round, then I think ranking is going to play a bigger role than what it has in the past. But then they want to try to avoid flights. I mean, end of discussion. If they can avoid a flight, they want to avoid a flight. And then the last question, would you expect Dort to play Grandview in a round 2 matchup with a win? It's just kind of where we're going. I don't know. I don't think so. It all just depends on who wins where, because somebody's got to go to Montana Western, and you've got College of Idaho is going to travel. And I think they want to avoid a first round rematch there, if possible, between College of Idaho and Montana Western. So you might get Montana Tech or Dickinson going over there, but then College of Idaho's got to travel. And where do you send them without having it to be a flight? So 3 of the Frontier teams getting in is really going to mess up some travel plans, especially with 2 of those for sure playing next round and one of them for sure hosting.
Yeah, one of those is flying. I mean, I think it's inevitable.
Yeah.
I mean, College of Idaho is far from everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's going to be a flight. I mean, then you look into, what's a convenient place to fly into, a larger city. That I've seen that happen before too. Like, oh, miraculously, so-and-so's flying into Chicago. It's obviously a little more accessible to do those things. So you want to, if possible, if you're doing the whole commercial thing, you want to avoid layovers, connections, all those things, because that's a whole other thing. Talk about additional distraction. You're sitting in, insert airport here for additional 4 hours. I mean, those are all real things. And I know I'm harping on it, but I probably have nightmares from over the years of just all those details that are. You're so paranoid. Coaches are insane, first off, and I'm one.
And you're one, yeah, obviously.
And I'm not any longer, but I was, and I'm the son of a coach, and I've been around a long time. We're all insane. We're high-strung human beings. We are routine-driven, and when things get off kilter of your routine of what you're accustomed to doing every single game week, you become unglued. And it's one of those things. Those that handle it well are, from a travel standpoint, can be successful. Those that do not. I've seen it. I've seen great teams. You've seen it, Jason. You've seen more NAIA games, as many as I have. It's certainly different locations. You see those teams that show up to a road game and maybe could be the better team, just lay an egg. I mean, they're just not into it. They're not. And then the weather factor, you put that into it. You have a southern, warm climate team come north. I mean, that's a real part of it too. So these matchups, location, who's traveling, who's hosting, all have huge bearing on outcome, in my opinion.
So, and you just look at it also from an experience standpoint. So what you're talking about, as a head coach, when you've been through the postseason before, you've got a huge advantage over somebody who hasn't. And you look at the staffs, Northwestern, they've been through it. Grandview's been through it. Kaiser, although new, they've been through it now. Georgetown has been through it. Marion, Indiana Wesleyan, Bethel, a little bit of a new staff there, but they are fortunate where they get to host the first round. So that helps them a little bit there. Montana Western, you have an experienced staff there that has not been in the postseason. Good administration. That I think they're going to have, some good help there as well. That plays to their advantage. Evangel, who's going to have a week off and then have to go someplace next week. Really first time them making it into the postseason. That could be treacherous. This is where Morningside gets the advantage. Now, granted, Morningside has not traveled a lot, but this is a staff and a school that is used to this in the postseason. You give them a little bit of advantage. Same with College of Idaho. They've got a staff and a school that is used to traveling to championships, albeit it hasn't always been, football, but they've had great basketball programs, a lot of other championship sports. This is not new to the school to know, like, we got to do this. And same thing with St. Xavier making it in there too. I would foresee them as a team that would travel well. Now, going through the first round matchups, you've got Reinhardt having to travel, Dickinson, Ottawa, and Louisiana Christian. Dickinson travels all the time. That will be old hat for them to have to go to Montana Tech. They'll take that in stride. Reinhardt, they've got some experience there as well. Kind of first time for Ottawa and a new staff, but a school that has traveled in the postseason. And LCU, this is all new to them. So that LCU Baker matchup, they could come in so fired up and so ready that Baker goes, what happened? Or they come in so flat because they've had to travel from Louisiana to Baldwin City, Kansas, the second week of November. Well, now going into the third week of November, that could be problematic as well.
No doubt. I'm anxious to see how far some of these trips are. I used to love doing this in the playoffs. Like, how far are they going this week? What's that bus trip like for these teams? That's a big deal. It's like, oh, we have to get all of our Avenger movies ready to go. And you get all the movies and stuff. The buses, those trips are, I mean, they're challenging, man. I mean, we've done so many of them over the years, and it's not easy. It is not easy at all. People think it's all like Big Ten travel. You're going to East Coast to West Coast on the beautiful jet and all the amenities. It's not that way in the NAIA. There's certainly some challenges, and those that roll with those challenges and overcome that are the ones that are successful. You look at, like you said, Kaiser last year, they've improved their road warriors, and they're traveling from South Florida to the upper Midwest multiple times and won big football games. So you tip your cap to them. They've done it, and there's a new program that's done it. So it can be done. Certainly it can be done. But I agree with you. I think it takes some experience, some people in leadership positions there that can guide you through those things. We'll talk later in the postseason. I think it's the same way in the national championship. I think those that understand what it is that you're going through and how to prepare your team for those distractions has a huge advantage as well when you get to that game. So all of this, I think it's a leadership thing that these programs and administrations, if they have their act together, can give them a distinct advantage.
Going through a couple of the comments that we've seen come in on the YouTube feeds here. So wouldn't the second round matchups feature 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, 8 versus 9, and then top 4 seeds await the winners of the first round games? No, it won't, because the NAIA championship series at this point is not bracketed and seeded. They will await the results of that first round. There'll be some travel accommodations that go in there. So it will not be, as easy as 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11. It very well could be. But they won't make that determination until they know what happens, with the 4 teams or the 4 games that are being played this week.
Ready for this one? Louisiana
yes.
Christian to Baldwin City, Kansas, 10 hours and 20 minutes.
It's beautiful. Like, you could get through. I mean, that's a trilogy, probably.
I think here's the next challenge. You're leaving Thursday.
Yeah.
So you are practicing. You're probably getting the players out of class. You're probably doing at least a mid-morning practice on Thursday. So you have a quick turnaround for probably Wednesday evening to a mid-morning, maybe early afternoon Thursday. You're jumping on a bus. I'm guessing you're going 8 hours at least, 7 hours, at least trimming some of that down. So you're not – bus legs are a real thing. I mean, you're talking 10-plus hours in the bus, and you're playing a game the next day. That's not going to go well typically. So you're probably doing a 2-day trip for that one. That's the first one I pulled up. I mean, that's significant. Yeah,
that's a pretty good drive. I mean, I do it in my sleep, but that's me.
18 to 22-year-olds in a bus, and you're at athletes. You get up and you got to stretch them. You better get out and move around. Certainly on Friday, extensive dynamic warm-ups and get the bodies back, because you don't think about it. Travel, even people for our age, we're tired after we drive a long time, but it does present some challenges and some fatigue for some athletes. So, that's interesting.
One of the kind of responding to a comment here. Now, what we did not say that the NAIA would absolutely avoid conference matchups in that first round. They want to try to avoid them whenever necessary. I don't think it's going to be avoided in the Frontier Conference, and we'll be able to hear Frontier fans, talk about that. But I do not foresee the Frontier Conference not playing somebody in the Frontier Conference, not this weekend, next weekend. It's going to be a tough one there, because you're going to have flights and everything involved. They want to try to avoid conferences and rematches, but if there's just no other way and you can't avoid a flight, it's going to happen.
Yep, Reinhardt's got 9.5 to St. Thomas.
Is it really 9.5?
Yeah.
Wow.
St. Thomas is down there.
It's a bit, and Reinhardt's not at the tip of Georgia either, so.
No, it's North Georgia. You're up in the mountains.
Yeah, so
you're going, and the worst part is you drive through Atlanta. That's 2
hours, and so
right there.
For comparison's sake, people will look at Dickinson. They got to travel to Butte, Montana. I think that Reinhardt drive is probably longer. I think Reinhardt having to go to Miami Gardens, Florida is probably farther than Dickinson, North Dakota to Butte. Now you're dealing with the Northern Plains travel next week, which could include snow, hurricane, tornado, cyclone, blizzard, lots of things. But honestly, living here in Fargo, I think our forecast for the next week is actually sitting decent. But who knows? There's an entire mountain range there.
Dickinson State to Butte, Montana, 7 hours, 27 minutes.
So actually a shorter trip than what LCU has, and a shorter trip than what Reinhardt's going to have. Now, Ottawa to Dort, I don't even know what that is, but I know from Sioux City roughly to Kansas City, you're talking 2.5, 3.5, 4. So you're about a 4-hour trip there probably. I mean, that's easy. Dort will take 20, hit I-29 in Sioux City, go straight south into Kansas City, jump over to Baldwin City from there, and won't be too tough of a.
Sounds like you've done that before.
Yep, I have actually. Actually, it's
5.5, 520,
5.5. 520 is what they say.
So I would go through Omaha, right?
Yeah, you gotta go through Omaha. You gotta go through most of Kansas City to get to that one.
Back around, yeah. So it's 520, 373. Long trips. Those are long trips.
Well, the interesting thing as you kind of break that one down. Actually, I reversed that. Dort is hosting, so Ottawa will go there. So interesting as the NAIA teams lie, Ottawa, who is like 20 minutes from Baldwin City, is going to drive 4.5 hours that way to play a game, and LCU is going to drive right past Ottawa to go play at Baker. So right in the backyard there. Interesting matchups. I like it, Pat. Yeah, we've gone on for an hour and 10 minutes here. There's so much stuff that needs to go through, and I'll have a full article that I'll write about NAIA football this week, kind of break down the matchups. I've got a couple of interviews that I've got lined up to talk to a few more people just to kind of understand more of the changes as we go into the next round. But as we do that, more information will come out this week, and Pat and I will have this show again next Sunday to discuss the pairings, as we will then look at the second round of the NAIA championship. That's the round that I always find where the upsets happen and is the toughest to plan, because it always falls the week of Thanksgiving, and with obviously Thanksgiving on Thursday, game on Saturday, you got school that's out, but then you're keeping kids around. So that is a very treacherous week as we go into the second round of the playoffs.
Done it a few times. It's a nightmare. Oh man. Have the team dinner, everybody pitch in. We've done that before.
Who got a turkey? Bring a turkey. Somebody get a Traeger. We'll throw it on there for a few hours.
Sure.
Don't put your deep fryer inside the locker room. We don't need any fires. Things like that.
The old potluck, man. I remember that.
So first round next week, Reinhardt, St. Thomas, Dickinson taking on Montana Tech. You've got Dorton and Ottawa, and then Baker and Louisiana Christian. So we've kind of hit what we came to talk about. I mean, I love recapping what happened during the week in NAIA football, but it kind of seems like a moot point to go through who beat what and who went where and all that sort of stuff. We can have a bigger show to break that down. I guess we're kind of into the randomness segment, if you will, right now, Pat, as we wind things down on the show. We're still taking people's questions. If you've got questions to ask us, we'll certainly answer those, whether you're putting those on Facebook or on YouTube or you're tweeting them at me. But as we wind down, any final thoughts from the regular season, Pat, or from the last week of the regular season?
No, not really. I think obviously the upsets that we discussed already. I think it's overall a really good year in the NAIA. I think we're seeing the parity, like we mentioned before, in the conferences. We're seeing some traditional powers continue, and we're seeing some new teams, like you mentioned. It's good to see Louisiana Christian, involved in the playoffs, and someone's kind of new to the game, and it keeps stretching the NAIA. Down South Florida still going strong with Kaiser getting the automatic bye, and then St. Thomas being in. I think it's fantastic to see those teams continue to grow and grow the NAIA really to the southeast and all points in between. It's fantastic. So I think the affiliation is really in a strong place, and I know there's teams adding. There's some news coming down. I know in the Midwest here of some teams that are coming to the NAIA. So that's a good news thing that's coming down the pike. I know. So I think it's in a good place, meaning that I think that the NAIA is as strong as it's been in a long, long time. And I think this playoff system is really, really good. I think it gives teams a great opportunity and some hope. The other thing too, you think about it, it sounds silly when you say this. These teams, these up and coming teams that are the last 8 teams in the postseason, They get an extra week of preparation. Okay, you're developing your team, another week of practice, another game of experience. Maybe some of these teams are younger. You're getting another opportunity. Obviously, you're seeing another part of the world, and you're traveling and getting that experience as well. So it's reward for a great season. Do any of these 8 teams have a chance at the national championship? We don't know. We'll see. Probably not. But at the same time, they're being rewarded for a great season, and go from there.
Stranger things have happened. I mean,
no question.
There have been low seeds that have made a run in the NAIA Championship Series, and that's what it's all about. And the other thing that happens here too, every team that made it into the postseason, we talk about the NAIA coaches rating being so important. Everybody that made it, that even just sneaked in, if you show out a little bit here in the postseason, you give yourself an opportunity for next year. Now, instead of not being rated, you're 18th. Couple wins in a row, you're up to 12. Couple more wins, you're sitting like Evangel is right now at number 9. Granted, you're not hosting first round, but this is a team that you could benefit by being rated in the year. We saw that with Southwestern early in the year when they were undefeated. They were rated very high. They then lost some games and fell out. But you need those wins. And an opportunity like this to play in the postseason helps you for next year, helps you for this year right now to get better as a team and to potentially pull some upsets. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see some of the teams that we've got coming in.
And there is carryover. There's no doubt. You just mentioned that, Jason. The final top 25 poll has huge bearing on things for next season. And those teams that are undefeated, I mean, they stay at the top. They're not going anywhere. Those teams don't move up and down traditionally. So the better you do the previous year certainly puts you in a better position to start the season. And you have that success again. You've established yourself. You've had that playoff experience, and you continue to build from the next year from the previous. I think that's huge. So these 8 teams have there's some significance here. Them a part of this for sure.
So my gut, I think 3 of the 4 games, I feel good about my gut with who I think is going to win. I feel like it's St. Thomas over Reinhardt. I feel it's Dort over Ottawa. I feel it's Baker over Louisiana Christian. But that one's a little tight, but my gut tells me there. The one that I don't know is Montana Tech and Dickinson. Is Montana Tech banged up? Are they firing on all cylinders? Is this the team that beat Central Washington, or do we have injuries and some other issues potentially? And Dickinson gets the opportunity to win this first round game. So that one I have to do a little bit more research on before I can say which way I got to go. You got any instant gut feeling on those 4?
I'm taking the home teams. I initially thought Reinhardt was hosting. I would shift now to St. Thomas. I think that's significant travel. There's a lot of distractions involved. I've been harping on it, but it's real. I would take, and again, a situation like this with this kind of this play-in type situation to the bracket of 16, I would take every home team. That's just my feeling from experience. I would.
Yep. It's tough to go against it, and that's nothing against the teams that have got to travel. We wish you luck. We wish you well.
Absolutely.
We want to see upsets. We want to see chaos like we did this week.
We'd love to have great things to talk about. Upsets are fun to talk about next week. So
kind of gets me into one of the final subjects I wanted to talk about. So I got banged on Twitter a little bit today, in terms of toughest conferences in the NAIA, and that the Mid-States Football Association, Mid-East, should have had more teams in. They're the toughest conference in the NAIA, and the Frontier Conference, is the toughest conference in the NAIA. They should have more teams in. And I think those are the 2 teams in the argument right now. I think from top to bottom, you can't necessarily say that the GPAC or the Heart or one of these other teams is a tougher conference top to bottom as those leagues. Now, the thing I will say about the Mid-States Football Association Mid-East, sometimes having a tough conference is great, but the better teams need to win. And a team like Concordia, they needed 1 less loss, maybe 2. I mean, you can lose to the top 2 in the conference, when Marion and Indiana Wesleyan, you could lose those games and beat everybody else and make the postseason. Beating Indiana Wesleyan really saves your season at the end, but you lost to Siena, you lost to Marion, and you lost to the University of St. Francis. Those are 3 losses, where 2 of the 3 were to teams that did not make the NAIA postseason, and really down the stretch weren't in consideration. So that always hurts some of the teams in these tougher conferences, when you do beat one another up like that. And, I know that Concordia had a fantastic season. They really did well in a game where they played a Division II school in Wayne State. They won that game. They also needed Wayne State to be better than 3-8 this year, because even though they're playing in that the GLIAC, you got Ferris State, you got Grand Valley State, and then a bunch of other teams after that right now. And you needed Wayne State to be a 6-4, 7-3 to even make somebody like me consider that being a super quality Division II win. It was a Division II win, don't get me wrong, but when you compare that resume to the resume of Montana Tech, who beat Central Washington, who qualified for the D2 postseason, it's pretty tough to say that CUAA should get in and Montana Tech should be left out then.
Yeah, being a part of that league for so long, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to say individuals. Concordia is better than some of the teams in the playoffs. I'm telling you that. They are. Trust me.
Absolutely. I would agree.
You could arguably say so is St. Francis. There's a couple of others that I think that are in that discussion, but the reality is this is what the conference is. And there has to be balance around the country in the NAIA. It can't just be all at large. I mean, there are significant advantages to you have to have the conference champions involved. Again, to build a strong organization top to bottom, I think you have to have those things in place. I think it's what's fair. I think it's what needs to be done to make the affiliation as strong as possible. And the at-larges are there. They are there. But again, like you mentioned, using Concordia as an example, tremendous win yesterday, but you can't drop 4 games in a year. You just can't. And that's the reality of it.
And it 100% comes down to, and the thing I love that the NAIA can say, you want to make the postseason, win your conference.
Win your league.
That is a guaranteed path. No ties in your conference. No, we split here. You win your conference, you make the NAIA championship series. Everything after that's an at-large. And to coin a phrase, I was talking to Matt Witwicky, who's a D2 football columnist. He's been a fan of NAIA football. He actually started his fandom with the University of Sioux Falls and then followed them to Division II and is now a D2 writer. Him and I were talking earlier today. He's like, it's like an MMA fight. You want to win the fight, knock the guy out, choke him out, get him to submit. Don't let it go to the judges' cards. And that's what the NAIA regular season is. If you want to make the postseason, don't let it go to the judges' cards. Win it, get into the postseason as conference champion, and you're there. And it's unfortunate for some of the teams that were unable to make it into the postseason. They're signing off on a fantastic season. I really look at Ottawa and Arizona as that team you feel bad for with only the one loss. It was early in the year. They win that game though. They're in the postseason. I mean, it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's how the postseason goes. Like I told my players many times, I tell my kids now, Jason, life's full of disappointing moments. It's tough. Sometimes you gotta overcome adversity. And again, I'm tongue in cheek with saying that, but at the same time, take care of your end of the business and win your league or perform better within your own conference. And these are moot points. So it's disappointing. Certainly, when I've been there, we've been there, but at the same time, you can go back to as the reasons why. So it's congratulations to the teams that are in, and you feel for those that just are on the outside looking in. But again, something to build on and learn from and grow from for next season. There you go. And like that, that's our NAIA show. We're probably done talking NAIA football. Pat and I didn't get much of a chance to catch up prior to the show starting, so this will just kind of be a random part of the segment for anybody that wants to stick around for it. But we will be back next week, Sunday night, same time. I believe that will work for both of us. I don't know. I'm assuming the pairings are the same deal. It's 6 Central. Yeah. I would assume so. They may come out earlier, but that will give us an opportunity to kind of break it down a little bit more and look into it. We were a little bit scattered all over the place trying to pull up a feed and see what teams were on, and we weren't able to hear the audio of the other broadcasts. So it'll give us a chance to kind of get in. So we'll be back again next Sunday night. Outside of that, that was really it, Pat. Did you have a good weekend? Was the family, was it a good time with the family this weekend? Yeah, I went down to Taylor and saw the Cougars play, saw St. Francis for the last regular season game. It was an exciting game. I'm not sure it was the cleanest game played. There's a lot of sloppiness, turnovers, and kind of crazy things that happen. It was always entertaining. But yeah, it was good.
Got to eat at Ivanhoe's. But you've been to Upland, Indiana. Ivanhoe's is the iconic ice cream shop. It's kind of like an old drive-in type place in little Upland, Indiana, but
nice,
unbelievable. It's like, great ice cream. It's my kids' first experience doing that. So we enjoyed that part. Then, of course, hockey today, man. I always have a hockey weekend. We got big hockey weekends coming up here the next handful of weeks. So get into that as well. So
I spent time in Omaha, went back, saw some friends, had to show off the baby to some friends. Family saw the baby for a little bit. So, I was back there doing that, waking up at 5:30 in the morning, getting my laptop out so I could update scores and get stuff ready for this. So I was doing that. Got to see the newly renovated Gene Leahy Mall, big outdoor walking mall in Omaha. Really nice down by the river. And then went to this Illuminarium. Took all the kids to that. My buddy's got 3 daughters. I've got a daughter. All the wives we went, and I'm glad mine is in a stroller, in a walker, watching his 3 children run from exhibit to exhibit just made me go, I'm glad we're only having one.
Just wait. She'll be mobile soon.
Oh, dude. I'm telling you, I'm not ready for it physically or mentally. Like, quite possibly the physical side of it is like all the squatting and moving and running. I'm like, I have got to lose some weight. And so I gotta do that. And
stay limber, the bending over and picking up. And it's a real thing. She starts
need to do some yoga. Need to get into that yoga stuff.
For sure,
some stretching.
I don't see you as a yogi. My Nebraska farm friend. I don't see you being a yogi, but maybe not.
Just getting a nice hot yoga session on a Saturday morning. Hey, Pat, how's it going? Gonna go get some chai tea now.
I like chai tea.
Of course you would. No,
I do.
I don't. I like tea, like regular green tea, whatever.
I love green tea. Oh, yeah. Have you ever had matcha, like the ground green tea? It's called matcha. Oh, it's like brain power, man. It's awesome.
Really?
I used to drink it before games.
Really?
It was like my secret weapon, but it was like my thing I did. So, oh yeah, highly recommend it if you want to get some, a little more sharpness to your brain and quick reaction time. I always felt it was a good kind of like a semi-stimulant, a little bit of caffeine in it. But yeah, big fan of the old tea there. But
have to give it a shot.
Yeah,
and give it
it's not good. It doesn't taste good.
It doesn't taste.
No, it's real earthy. I mean, it's real earthy. It's like a mouthful of dirt.
That's why I don't drink coffee. I'm not. I haven't acquired. I have not acquired the
I love
taste.
It all. I pretty much like anything that's bad for you.
Well, I mean, I'm the same. It's just I haven't acquired the taste for coffee.
You like wine?
Alcohol.
You like wine?
Big wine guy.
Yeah, I love wine. Guy. Yeah, red wine is something much better in the world. Yeah,
definitely a red guy. I like watching our viewer count right now go down and down.
What are these guys talking about?
By the way, anybody that tuned in, like our NAI football talk got done about 3 minutes ago. This is just Pat and I talking about random stuff for a few minutes before we sign off and go back to our regular lives.
We got into it for an hour and 25 minutes. I mean, we were all in on the old NAI in the first round matchups here. So,
and the thing I've said about this show since I started doing it, if I can't have fun doing this show, I don't want to do it. And tonight was fun. Don't get me wrong, but I like to talk to my buddy and catch up a little bit too. And these conversations like weave other places as we go.
You can talk family, talk food. We both like food. Yeah. If we're on a teeter-totter, I'm not sure which one of us is up in the air. We're probably close.
Yeah, I think
I'm not dropping numbers here. I'm just saying, if we're on a teeter-totter, I'm not sure who's in the air. We're big men. I'm a tall guy too.
You're tall.
You're 6 feet plus, aren't you?
I'm just slightly over 6 foot. So I can claim that. But you're like 6'2", 6'3", aren't you?
Yeah.
Getting shorter by the year.
And 40 pounds is just my head. You can see that. At least 40 pounds. Just gigantic Irish head. It's a one. Yeah.
I know the feeling. It's why I kind of sit back on the camera here, because if I was up like this, it would just be like all head in the entire thing. It would not be good. Nobody would enjoy that at all.
It's just red faced. Yeah.
All right. We should probably wrap this show up. So going to end the stream here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Everybody that lasted at the very end, make sure you tweet us, make sure you contact us. If you've got questions about stuff going on in the NAI, reach out to victorysportsnetwork.com, mail at Victory Sports Network. See us on Twitter, Facebook. We are on YouTube. Do the whole thing. Thank you, Pat. Any final words before we sign off here?
No, everyone have a great week and looking forward to a week from tonight for the next round. Be fun.
All right. For Pat Donnelly, I'm Jason Dannelly. And for everybody in NAIA football land, we appreciate you checking out this show. We look forward to seeing you next week at the exact same time. So long, everybody.